Louisa Conklin, candidate for District 1, Frederick County Council. Louisa, thank you for doing this. What's your passion?
What is my passion? Right now, my passion is doing right by the people of Frederick County.
Mm-hmm. So what does that mean?
That means,
to you, if that makes
sure. That means responding to a change that I think we're seeing in folks. There's a lot of distrust of government, and I think for a while, general distrust of government was against the Democrats. They were the sort of the establishment party, and then it's swung because of how bonkers things are in the national stage.
Bonkers is a word.
Yeah. And so it swung to where people are very distrustful of the right, as they should be. And I want to make sure that people feel like they have a viable option. People are right to be angry that the cost of living is out of control, and it has been. And, I was very active in 2024, canvassing for Kamala Harris, canvassing for Democrats in Congress. I did a lot of canvassing in Pennsylvania. So, and I think the message was everything's okay, everything's fine. And it wasn't. So
how much of that do you think was tied to kind of Biden, meaning like they were trying to pretend like we were in charge, and so we don't want anyone to think we made any mistakes? Meaning, I guess the question is, if it hadn't been Kamala Harris, do you think that the Democrats would have had that same message, or do you think it was, how tied to the fact that she was part of the previous administration?
Nobody was at the wheel. Nobody was at the wheel. You can't put a candidate in 98 days before the general election and pretend that is leadership and pretend that that's strategy.
Yeah, we don't want to relitigate it all over and over again, but
what's happened since then that has made people feel better?
Oh yeah, like virtually nothing. Like I think it's, we have historically the least popular president that's ever existed, right? At least under modern kind of polling, our ability to gather information.
Yeah.
And yet the Democratic Party is 20% approval rating, 25%, like equal and in line with a human being who is like openly putting his face and his name on buildings and on our money and on just like things that we growing up I would have never even thought. But that insanity, which we think is utter insanity,
right?
The Democratic Party is just as unpopular.
Almost. I mean, I think there are two macro trends in the country right now if you look at electoral politics across the country. And one is Democrats flipping red seats.
Yeah,
which
this
is,
year at least.
Yeah, which I think shows a trend where people are the distrust is shifting to the Republican Party because of what you're talking about, the relentless self-aggrandizing, the completely feckless national policy, international policy. It's insane. And so people are willing to try anything in response. So that's one trend, is flipping seats that are blue. There's a trend of progressives winning. My parents live in New Jersey 11, where a progressive candidate, Annalila Medina,
I'm not sure,
beat Tom Malinowski, who is more of a stalwart Democrat. So there is that trend. It's not everywhere. Abigail Spanberger is a pretty centrist Democrat, and I would expect Virginia to vote for a pretty centrist Democrat. But I think that's one trend. The other trend is across the country, we are seeing local voters vote out electeds who have been overtly pro-data center.
You're saying nationally?
Nationally, that's a trend we're seeing across the country. And it's really, it's very hard to beat incumbent locals, as you know. Well, you didn't run
Yeah,
against
yeah.
a local, but you know
Yeah,
what
but
it's like.
I ran against somebody who was beloved and established inside of the community. So,
Right.
yeah, it's certainly, you can't, 20 some years of his participation in that district
Right.
certainly gave him a lot of name recognition and, just because I think that most people when they vote are not. I'm not going to say everybody's like low information voter, but there's a big gap between low information and knows everybody, knows individually what people are, which frankly is part of why I'm doing this, is trying to get to know people. There's this huge gap in between, and I would say 80 or 90% of the voters know a little bit about people. But if you've been around for forever, they know a little bit more about you.
Right.
I mean, it's just by nature of the fact that you existed around here for forever.
Right, and there's always an incumbent advantage. But the fact that in local races where you don't have the scale of being kind of an upstart, where that could be an advantage, like it has been for, say, somebody like Graham Plattner in Maine, in a local race, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah, because you're talking about a couple thousand votes. You're not talking about millions of
people. You're talking about a few thousand voters. Yeah. So in terms of running a grassroots campaign, that's just, you've got less to work with. But we're still seeing that voters feel so strongly about this issue and the way it's been marketed to them that they're willing to vote out incumbents, which is pretty remarkable, I think.
Okay, so before we get back to Frederick County, you mentioned your folks in New Jersey. So what's your story? Where were you born? How'd you end up here in Frederick County and all that?
Sure. Oh gosh, I could take a long time with this answer. But so I am from northern New Jersey. Fun fact about me. So New Jersey is the Superfund capital of the country. It has more Superfund sites, I believe, than any other state, and it's small.
Yeah.
And so I grew up on a Superfund site. My parents bought our house knowing that there was radium in the property, not under our house. There were houses in our neighborhood where the radium was under the house. Radium is highly toxic. It's really difficult to link cancer to any specific cause, but there were people in the neighborhood who had leukemia, different blood cancers. My dad actually has a rare bone marrow cancer now that may or may not have to do with radium exposure. It's well managed, so that's good. I think you met him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So growing up in the Superfund site, my mom became concerned because when they bought the house, they were told that there was radium on the property, but there was a plan to clean it up. And my parents waited for a few years and no plan materialized. So she started showing up at the local meetings and saying, hey, what are you going to do about this? And that didn't really accomplish a lot more than pissing off the mayor and the council. And so, she started talking to her neighbors. And the problem with talking to neighbors was that a lot of them were not terribly forthcoming with the state of their homes and the radium in their homes. People didn't want to talk about it. People were maybe ashamed. Maybe they were hoping that they could keep it on the down low and sell the house. But it wasn't, it was kind of a taboo. So she had to talk to people anyway until she found folks that were like-minded who wanted to organize. And that's what they did. They organized. They Xeroxed flyers that would have been handwritten back in the day. We didn't have a home computer in 1988. So they Xeroxed flyers that they handed out to the neighborhood, and people over time started talking about it more, and they started talking about how they felt, which was afraid and angry and despairing. And, they channeled all of those feelings into a movement that eventually swayed the mayor and council. And, I'm from an affluent town. Our neighborhood at the time was really working class, small homes, small lots. And, the people in the mansions up the hill from us, I don't think anybody thought they had much concern about our neighborhood. But it turned out that they did. When they heard about what was happening, when they heard about what my neighbors and my family were going through, they didn't think it was acceptable. So they joined the movement. They put their support behind it, and the mayor actually offered to pay to send all of their letters to our representative and our senators, and that's ultimately what it took. We needed to get federal support to push back on the EPA and say that they were going to actually remediate all of the homes, not just the homes that had it in the basement.
And so that was, it ended up being that the federal government paid for remediation across these properties. So it was really like Congress had to get involved.
Congress had to get involved.
At least the administration had to get involved.
Right. So it was a Superfund site. The federal government, that means the federal government knew that there was an environmental hazard in the area that required some kind of remediation. But the real question was, what would that remediation involve? And, would they just demolish all of the homes and turn it into a brownfield site? That was one consideration, to turn the little park up the street into like a landfill for it or something. What they had settled on was just leaving it in place and putting more soil over it, putting heavier soil over it to seal it in, and that was not sufficient. That wasn't enough to reassure people.
Yeah.
So
this happens in the 80s. This is, you're growing up, so obviously this is kind of in your lineage to. I always tell people I'm a local agitator, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of in your lineage. So tell me about that kind of journey from this moment. I hope it eventually did get remediated, or
it took a long time. So what I tell people right now is that I don't think the data center fight, which I think is also the fight against generative AI taking over our lives, I don't think it's a short-term fight. I think there are things in the short term. There are successes in the short term to fight for, but I think it's a longer-term fight. But I mean, from the time that my parents and my neighbors started organizing to the time that the EPA declared us clean, declared my community risk-free, no longer a Superfund site. I mean, I don't think they wrapped up until 2012.
Oh, wow. So, 20, 25 years of...
So,
of
gosh,
asking.
I mean, isn't that more like 15 years?
Well, you said 88.
2012. No, that's, yeah. I guess, wow, it did. I think it did take that long. The thing is, when it's an EPA...
Check my math later.
Yeah, no, I think I as I was saying it. So when the EPA does declare something a Superfund site, once you do that, you can't half clean it.
Yeah.
So long after the radium was gone, they had to chase every other little thing they found in there, because that's how it works. So
So then tell me about, so you grew up kind of, this is what was going on kind of in your home, and your parents, you were growing up inside of this space where you had neighbors that there were health effects, and you said even potentially your father, health effects. So, all right, tell me about the journey from North Jersey down to my favorite place, Frederick County.
Well, so do you mean? Oh, I guess you're asking about my personal history. Well,
correct.
I'll give you kind of like the jump cut. I think I've seen myself in and my family and my community in what people are feeling in Adamstown, like blindsided and betrayed, and angry and hurt. And I don't make cheap promises, but I haven't given up on Adamstown, and I think it's a long fight, and I'm in it for the long fight. So that is the jump cut. In terms of, how did I wind up in Frederick County? That's a longer story. So I attended college in the state. I went to Johns Hopkins. I graduated in 2006, and I lived in New York for a few years after that. That's a pretty common trajectory for young people from northern New Jersey. I wound up, I moved to Brooklyn, and completely coincidentally moved next door to a friend of mine from high school. And we didn't realize until like 3 months in. So that's both it's a wild coincidence, but also it shows you a lot of the kids I grew up with were living in New York or northern New Jersey in the cities like Hoboken and Jersey City.
So that was, you said 2006, 2007.
Yeah.
Was the city still, because, obviously 2001, 9/11 was a giant impact on my life.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up joining the Marine Corps 4 years later. And so, there's still some effects here. Was the city still, could you still feel it in 2006, 2007? Had they like, because I know it's a giant city. There's millions and millions of people, but there's some things that kind of stick in the zeitgeist. Did it still feel that way, or kind of had the city recovered by 7, 08, 09?
Well, okay, so the ways that you could feel it. I mean, I worked downtown, and from my office, I worked in this little nonprofit, and I think it was Church Place, which is downtown. Don't quote me on that, but so from my office, you couldn't quite see Ground Zero, but you could kind of see the edge of it. And I remember like the early truther movement, protesting. Yeah, it was pretty raw. I mean, it was something that was felt. I didn't personally know anyone who was in one of the buildings, but people who I'm close to still knew people. So it's rare to find somebody with probably more than 2 degrees of separation from the loss of life from the attack.
So because of the insanity of Trump and just the world we live in now, just how everything is like just everything is a blizzard all the time, right? Like everything is insane all the time. We forget that there was a bunch of people that's it was about like steel doesn't melt at a certain point or something, like kind of all this conspiracy. Now, I will simply, during my time working for the federal government in the Marine Corps, my perspective is anything of that size, there's no such thing as a conspiracy that big, because no one can keep their mouth shut. You're going to tell me no young person in a bar trying to impress some girl like said something like, oh, I really know what happened,
Yeah.
So I don't think there was any, like, I think the planes actually hit, et cetera. But there was a lot of, that was the kind of the beginnings of the internet, right? We didn't quite have smartphones yet, but I remember even on 9/11 going online and going, well, what is the Trade Center? And I was a kid, but we still had access. And I just heard David Frum say this recently, the author, he writes for like The Atlantic and stuff, that the price for knowing, being educated the way we are now, we have so much access to information, that the price of being educated is conspiracy theories. That the fact that we have all this information now creates this space for, well, we can start interpreting it in 100 different ways. So you talked about, and this is part of my hatred of generative AI and this idea of like taking ideas out of human. It's bad enough that we're coming up with crazy things, right?
Yeah.
It's like we don't have the power. So do you fear that kind of separation from truth as much as, I am so terrified that what we think is real and true, that it's only really true if we can defend it, right? That now it's gotten to the point where maybe we get to a critical mass of people that 2020, right, the election. There are people that are testifying in front of Congress saying that the president was, did win. But, like, I can't say that, well, Biden was, through the process, Biden was, he was made the president. But, and so we now have millions of people that think that this was a lie. So, my question is how afraid are you of this? I am terrified of this post-truth world.
The post-truth world? I'm not sure if I agree with David Frum. I think we're there. And I think our information has always been imperfect, and there have always been conspiracy theories, and sometimes they have been accepted. In many points in the past, conspiracy theories have been accepted as lawful truth, like in the Salem witch trials.
Yeah.
Like,
Sure.
that is a conspiracy theory that I think should have been transparently easily dismissed at the time and wasn't because of bad ideology. So I think that
But also, don't you think power, meaning the people, the institutions that were in control at the time, the church, the government, which really, especially in Massachusetts at that time, were virtually the same. The pastors and the governors; these were all kind of in the same set of people. That they used that.
Yeah, of course they do that. I mean, like, look, Cambridge Analytica is like, that was real. We all lived through it, and sometimes it was so effective that sometimes I'm like, well, I mean, like, I understand the sort of question begging kind of shadow of a doubt space that the pushers of that kind of bad faith effort live in, where they're like, well, it's up to the people who read this to believe it. And in some way I'm like, yeah, I mean, but it doesn't, that was still interference from a foreign government that involved brainwashing a bunch of Americans. And I'm kind of concerned, I'm concerned that that's happening now with the left, with Iran, with the Lego videos. They're very, eminently watchable. And they're tapping into the way a lot of leftist sympathizing people feel about the fury that we have with our crazy president. And also Iran's government is it's an autocracy. Our government is autocratic as well, but
yeah, it's kind of like hiding behind democracy now.
I don't like feeling like I'm being tricked into sympathizing with a different autocracy because it's not the one that I'm personally angry at because it's personally impacting me the most. I think everyone in the world should be able to live in a non-autocratic state. So
I don't know how we get there, but I wish. Okay, so how do you then guard yourself from that? How should people guard themselves from this? Where there seems to be so much of, to your point about if it's on my side, like I am upset with Trump, so I have this source that I would never, external to this situation, I would never look at a video from Iran. I'm saying this as an idea. I look at everything, but somebody wouldn't look at a video from Iran and give it any credence whatsoever, right? Same thing kind of with the negotiations where we go, well, what is going on over there? Well, now we can't trust the U.S. government and we can't trust the Iranian government.
Yeah.
I never trusted the Iranian government, but now I also can't feel. So how do we guard ourselves against that? Because it seems like it's just tribalism. Like, what's on my team, I'm just going to believe everybody on my side. And then anybody that's not on my side, I'm just going to assume they're wrong.
Yeah.
How do we get to the actual truth, I guess, if you could solve that for the world really quickly.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was a philosophy major, so it's a question about epistemology. I don't have a good answer, but I do think that, I mean, if you take it back to what I'm doing and why I'm running because I think people need to know that there are good faith actors who will reject bad faith arguments and stick up for what people actually want and actually need. And, sometimes I feel like I am preaching to a very big choir, and other times I feel like people don't want to agree with me, but it's so for example, if I'm talking about data center expansion, about checking the power of developers who are pushing for this expansion, and their influence in our local politics, that is most people I talk to, that resonates with them. Mm-hmm. If I'm talking about the need for affordable housing, I think a lot of people, it resonates with them, but they agree. But if they're not personally experiencing it, sometimes the instinct is to, put concerns about overdevelopment ahead of the need of a large segment of our community for affordable housing. And so then I have to look at facts and, real trends that we can point to, and start trying to persuade people.
I mean, this is an argument discussion I've had with some of my very closest friends, where it's once you're in a house, once you have that security of owning a home, it gets real easy to say, well, we should stop building.
Right.
That we shouldn't have anything more at all, like
Right.
zero, right? Which is, and I've, again, ad nauseum here, I've said, I mean, that's literally impossible. Like we can't, like that's not possible, right? So maybe there should be some throttle on it, but the reality is that that perspective is so easy to get to once you're through. I spoke with a immigration attorney who has done a lot of work inside, a lot of work to do these days, and he said that the thing that surprised him the most was that the willingness of people to pull the ladder up immediately behind them.
Yeah.
And I've seen this a lot with people because, again, I grew up in Boundary Creek, but I grew up here. But my folks were Montgomery County. They moved into Frederick County.
Yeah.
Back in the mid 80s, but still. So they were some of the beginning of this long trend. But now it seems so often that I have conversations with people that once they've achieved home ownership, it's, well, I want my property value to go up. I don't want my taxes to go up, but they are going to go up if your property value goes up. But also, if we build more houses and we maybe suppress the property values a little bit, the growth of the property values a little bit, well, that provides other people opportunity. Yeah, but that hurts me because now my house isn't worth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So this is another area in which it's like teams, meaning it's like team I have a house, has all the power, and is writing all the rules, and team I don't have a house is looking at this impossible cliff to climb.
Yeah. So the Zillow value of your house is probably inflated, and unless you are imminently trying to sell your house or borrow a lot of money against the value of your house, it's not, I don't think it's really something to hang too much onto. I mean, my house is not worth a lot.
It's like
either way. We bought
value.
a really.
But if you sold it to try to move somewhere else, you're not like. Where are you going to move?
And here's the thing: our whole housing market is a social system. If there are no people to buy your house because their rent is insane, and they aren't able to save anything, and their job doesn't pay them enough, and your home value has gone up substantially, then your home value, if you try to sell your house, it's going to sit on the market, or you're going to have to sell it for a lot less than what Zillow says it's worth.
So how do you, because you've been having these conversations with people, how do you parse out that, as I said, that difference between once I own a home, now all I want is property values to go up?
So I think there are a couple of things happening. One, there are genuine and I think valid concerns that when we overdevelop and we strain our resources, everybody is put at risk, and that is true. So if we don't have a long-term plan for water management, and we're adding lots and lots of specifically suburban tracts, so new HOA communities, that we're kind of taking a twofold hit on water, right? So we're adding a lot of people who will need water, and this is an issue. For example, in my community, I think this is somewhat of an issue for folks in Brunswick Crossing, which is one of the newer communities, the newer HOA communities. But the water is an issue that impacts everyone, right? So we're seeing we're adding people who will need water, and we're also taking away land that previously could reabsorb rainwater. So we're reducing our permeable surfaces, exactly, and that contributes to drought conditions that we're seeing. So our drought is causing us to have to sort of be, the drought is in the short term, I think, caused by irregular rainfall patterns, but it's not helped by the way we've built.
Certainly, but back to my question though is about those. How do you say to somebody? How do you convince somebody who is, again, I think probably for all the right reasons,
Yeah.
like anti-growth, right? Like I don't want any more.
Right.
Because they have what they have.
Yeah.
How do we have that conversation?
So first of all, I think it's important to recognize, like I was saying, the concerns about water, about
Sure.
the grid, the electrical grid,
Sure.
concerns about traffic and traffic mitigation, and schools are another big one,
Yeah.
right? I think first of all, we need to be willing to stick up for those resident concerns, and then we also need to look at who is impacted when we don't have affordable housing. So I talk about some of the folks who I think are most in need of affordable housing. So I live in the old part of Brunswick, and I was just knocking doors earlier today. There are a lot of older people in my neighborhood. They're in older homes. These homes I don't think are ideal for aging in place. Now, many of them may want to age in place anyway. And I think we should continue to support our older residents who want to age in place. But there are also a lot of people for whom their old house may be a burden, and there's no option for them. They don't have the equity to buy a new home, which is where we've put the focus of our development for seniors. It's basically, let's allow developers to expand in areas that are at capacity in terms of their schools by building homes that are for older people who don't have kids.
Yeah.
That's not a good solution for seniors who need housing and don't have the money to move into a new home. And it addresses the concern about school capacity, but it doesn't address the concerns about water management or, the electrical grid. So I think we have to look at better solutions, like including deeply affordable housing units tying those into existing capital projects where we have some money earmarked for it, where we know it's going to happen.
So what how? Like what mechanism?
What mechanism?
Yeah, do we use? Because I agree with you. That,
Yeah.
I mean, if I get to wave a magic wand, then every house is like $100,000, not $400,000, right? But I don't have my magic wand. So
Yeah,
what is the real wand?
So houses, it's really hard to make them deeply affordable.
Yeah.
And I don't know that tiny houses are necessarily the best thing for older people specifically, but including accessible units into, say, a new senior center project where we have money for that project is one way. And that can
This is
potentially...
the government building that house.
Yeah. I mean, in some cases, it's the government building or the government funding in some way that housing. And it's funny because when I was gathering signatures for the data center referendum, I was talking to both Democrats and Republicans, and I was surprised to hear Republicans telling me not only that they see the need for deeply affordable housing. When I say deeply affordable housing, I mean housing that's not just affordable to like 80% of the real median income of Frederick County, but that's housing that is affordable to somebody on an extremely limited income.
Yeah.
So, I was hearing people say, like, even when I would ask, like, is this something that you think the government should help with? Should they help with, building this housing? And I heard people say yes. Who I would not expect to.
that the Republicans in these areas have it's such an issue now
because
that they're willing to even let the government be involved.
No, because they're people, and when you're talking about senior citizens, then you're not talking about this person that I can't imagine. As somebody trying to come in from Montgomery County because it's cheaper here. You're talking about their sister. You're talking about their dad, and yeah, they want those folks to be taken care of. And the leap isn't very, very hard to make. And yes, believe it or not, even people who I think defensively go into othering people who need something that they already have, they are still capable of empathy. And I found that when this is something, it's triggering for me because I didn't get very far into my past, but I am somebody who struggled to pay for housing for a very long time. So it is actually triggering to me to hear someone say, we don't need affordable housing. And my response can be to lecture and to go into you're wrong, like to argue with somebody. And part of becoming a politician has been realizing that that's not going to work. That's not pragmatic. it's not about looking for a mic drop moment. It's about recognizing where somebody is coming from, empathizing with that, understanding their concerns, and telling them about, inviting them to consider people that they might not have considered. So seniors are one group. I also, when I'm out knocking doors, I see a lot of young people who are living with mom and dad, living with their family. And it used to be, when I was in my mid-20s, that was a choice. Maybe you moved in with mom and dad because you were saving for a house, you were going to grad school. That's why, and I am thinking about middle-class kids here, middle-class young adults. That's why folks might have lived with their parents, or they just wanted to. They were frugal and wanted to save money. But there is no choice, and it's not just a lack of choice for kids who are, middle class, lower income. It's kids who are from like affluent families. There's just nothing. And the definition of affluent is changing along with the definition of everything else. Like middle class in 2026 is nothing like middle class in 2016.
Right, there is, and I'm sure at some point I will share this in social media. But I mean, there's this graph from 1950 to today of the tax, burden on the community, and how, like, starting at the top end to low end. And I mean, it's just this forgotten middle. I mean, the middle class that in the 50s and the 60s and 70s, the American dream. You get your home and your white picket fence and you and a spouse and kids, and it just is completely unattainable for anyone who does not have any access to opportunity.
Right.
And that opportunity, there are some people that can get there. The vast majority of them that opportunity is provided by previous generations, right? The vast majority of people that it's, your X number, and I will Google this later, but X number more likely, like if your parents owned a home, for you to own a home, right? It's like way more likely, like not even close.
Yeah.
So again, and not to repeat, but back to but what is and this is part of my journey, this is part of why I'm having these conversations. I'm trying to understand what are the real, like, how do we do this? Is it policy that we write? Is it we say you can't build, because there's, for example, Montgomery County has a giant pile of money that they borrowed. So it's government debt, which is way less cost than corporate debt, right? And then they use that money to loan out at low interest rates to developers to build low and medium income housing. That lowers it it doesn't get it to nothing, but that lowers a little bit down. And I don't think we're ready for the government just being the only builder, right? I don't think we're there. Well, maybe I lean on this as the actual solution, right? I don't think we, both our policies, our community. So what is the, like, how do we, because you said it right. We need to have deeply affordable housing as a part of any project. Do we mandate that? How do we get there is my question that as I said, I'm asking everybody. Anybody would be willing to answer that question, because I want to know.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the answer. Yes. Everything. Yes, we should. I agree that we're not in a place where the government can be the only builder.
Yes.
But do we look at having a housing authority in Frederick County? Yeah, absolutely. We should be considering that. We should be looking at county-owned property. And not in a narrow way. And I think Frederick County is actually very ready for that, to look at libraries, to look at senior centers, to look at the Prospect building, right? Capital projects that we may not think of as housing, like looking at them for potential housing. I think we need to do the same with schools as well, to be fair. I think we need to.
Interesting, having housing and then like a school, like as a part of.
No, I'm not saying build housing into schools. I'm saying I think we need to rethink about what a school building is. Like, think a little bit more broadly, because I also have noticed that in Frederick County, going back to New Jersey, interesting thing about New Jersey, I didn't realize this until I went to college, but every inch of land in New Jersey is incorporated. I didn't know what an unincorporated town was until I was an adult.
Yeah.
And I had no idea how many towns I thought of as towns, like Point of Rocks, were not municipalities. For my first, I was learning about it my first year in Frederick County. So in my school district that I grew up in, which was a municipal school district, when we hit a population bump, there was no place to build. The town was, it's 3 miles by about 1.5 miles, I think, is the size. It's a tiny town. And there were maybe 3 buildings. They did expansions on the school, but after that, when there still wasn't room, it was, where are you going to go? And the answer was they bought a bank. And instead of having elementary, middle, and high school, they had elementary school, upper elementary school, a middle school, and a high school. And the middle school was fewer grades. The upper elementary school was fewer grades. So that's flexible. And the thing about a bank that's been converted to a school is if the population demands go down, if you don't have as many children in town who need to go to school, then, you can, it's kind of a modular thing. You can convert it to be something else.
Oh, interesting.
So I think we have to
spaces that you kind of
think more flexibility.
Yeah, is the way of thinking about
people are looking at using malls for housing, and it's kind of it's super. It's kind of uncanny when I've seen it, but it's cool. I mean, I think it's interesting to kind of look at a space and see what's possible and not just what it's done in the past. I think it's kind of like thinking like a designer.
So one of the things I've been on a crusade for is, during the, and I apologize to everybody who's heard me saying this 1,000 times, but during the Blaine Young, Billy Shreve, Kirby DeLauder years of the county commissioners, they removed the ability for Frederick County to charge a different rate for residential properties than it is for commercial properties. And I think that that's a huge opportunity that we're setting aside the business personal property tax, which we need to do anyway, but setting that aside, the fact that we can't say to Walmart that you're going to pay different per square foot of property.
Right.
And again, not all your parking lots. It's just the building portion of it that we're getting tax dollars from. That we cannot say to Walmart, and I know, and I can already hear in the, well, what about the mom and pop shops? And I'm a very, very small business owner too, so I'm agreeing that it can't be just every property, no matter what, we jack it way up. But I think there could be categories.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the big reason this doesn't happen is because of District 4, which you're running in a county council district that is mostly inside of this legislative district.
Yeah.
Where because we have completely 4 Republicans, 3 delegates, and a state senator, they are not for this. So I've just been on a crusade to remind people that this is the reason why everyone's so complaining. The same people that are so happy, again, that their property values are going up, well, they're all upset that their property taxes are going up.
Right.
Well, that's because 75-80% of the cost of doing business, the services that Frederick County provides, are on the backs of residential property owners. So I don't even know if there's a question here. It's more of a can you join me in this? This is crazy to me that we can't charge a different. Do you agree? Disagree?
I agree. I would go back to the macro trend and say that we need to talk about the importance of getting of flipping our state delegation so we can get some of this stuff done. I agree that we need to lean more heavily, specifically on big businesses, and I think that what makes a place business friendly, it's historically been thought of in a really limited way, which is taxes, and I actually think what makes a place business friendly is having lots of smart people who have what they need, have their basic needs taken care of, and aren't, and some of this is things like healthcare. Like if you, something I heard, I know I'm not stumping for Graham Plattner here, but I remember hearing him give a speech where he talks about imagine all of the amazing things that people would do if their healthcare wasn't tied to their employment. So there are things that are not easily addressed at the county level of government. But having great schools is a huge draw for the kinds of smart, resourceful people who start businesses.
Yeah, very much so, because you're talking about a future workforce. I mean, I do so much of this work inside a workforce for that exact reason, that to me, it's also just what they're going to vote. I mean, I just think that the more educated the next generation is, the less chance of fascism, right? The less chance that, like, the more, because, I mean, just if you look trend after trend after trend, it is the more educated you get, the more you understand this siphoning of wealth away and just all this that is happening. But, back to, it's not something that gets solved like today, because it's really, we need to get like generations in a row of higher education.
Right.
I don't mean higher meaning college. I mean higher
No.
education in their grades. That they're learning more.
Right. And you're a business owner and I'm not, but we both have parents who were business owners in the trades. So I think we both have a deep respect for the trades. And it's empirically, there is growing demand for tradespeople. So I am including trades education when I talk about education excellence. I'm including including support for students who need it, who maybe not college bound, who maybe will have special needs that will be throughout their lives, right? I think that excellent education covers all of that. It covers our community college being a bridge to higher ed for kids who might not make it otherwise. So
I'll bring
and for not just kids, but adults who maybe didn't get a chance. Never got a chance 100%. To get their degree.
All right, so I'll bring it back to that path to get. So what is the we talk about, and I'm not sure if it was you or one of the other, maybe it was Sam, but it was talking about like we want to get to 21 students per teacher and these kind of things that we mark out as.
When you say Sam, are you talking
Sam Newhouse?
Okay.
Yeah, I think he said it during one of the forums. I go to all of them, so it all jumbles together.
There are a couple of Sams running for different offices.
Oh, okay. So I think running for county council. And he was talking about this kind of 21. So I mean, there's probably a lot of things that we can say. Well, what does a good school system include, right? And so more facilities for CTC is part of this. Lower classroom sizes is part of this. Better outcomes. All sorts of things that we can say. All right, if we're going to paint a picture in the future of what it looks like.
Yeah.
So my question again: you're running for office. So how do we get to 21 students? How do we get to higher testing scores? You're not running for school board and you're not going to be on the school board. So I don't necessarily mean the curriculum of it, but certainly the county council is responsible for funding, right? So how do we get the funds we need to do the thing we need to do?
It goes back to what we were talking about with understanding that being a place that supports businesses and that supports a healthy, robust economy is fundamentally comes down to how you invest in people. And school is the biggest investment. I believe that when we invest in our schools, and we do that by asking our large corporations to pay for their fair share, and we use that money, we invest it in our schools, that's how we get to a school system that is truly fully funded. And I don't think that fully funded has a fixed definition. When I talk about fully funded, I'm thinking about what teachers and support staff and FCPS think of, right? Yeah. What it means to them, what it means to students, what it means to parents. So,
well, this is, I know you've been in this fight for a while, but for me here in Frederick County, this has been a 10 or 15 year long just slog to convince people that we need to be investing. I just go, it's not a waste of money.
Yeah.
But if it was a waste, I'd rather waste it inside the mind of a child. Like if we're going to use a dollar inefficiently, that's where I want to spend it. Like that's where I come from,
Yeah.
But it is still, there is this giant perspective. And I remember when the headquarters was built for FCPS downtown, that there was just so much angst over this building that if you had visited the previous building that they were in,
Yeah.
it was just insane that they were trying to operate. I mean, there's like 45,000 kids in our school
Right,
system,
right.
So I think that there needs to be oversight, and I think that we need to be asking, just like we would in business, for KPIs, and are you hitting your marks, and what are we spending the money on? And we don't just give them a check and go, hey, go buck wild. But I do think that we should be investing more. Like, it should be the first thing that we invest in, right?
Yeah.
So that does mean that we need to. So is that, again, do you think it's the business personal property tax? Do you think it's the commercial tax rate? Like, how do we then, because at the same time, you have everybody that in the county going, well, what are you doing raising my taxes? I think it was 2 years ago, the school board said, or maybe it was the county, but like they did raise taxes. They said, look, the only way we can
The
fund
county executive,
FCPS,
my understanding is, raised taxes, and she raised property taxes. And Frederick County's property tax is about in the middle of the state. Like it's, and Maryland's property taxes are not exceptionally high, but our income taxes are very high.
Yeah.
So I think property taxes become a vehicle, they become easily politicized, and people want assurance that we're not going to make their lives more expensive right now, and they need that assurance. And I can assure people I have no plans of raising property taxes because I don't think it just feels so unfair. People.
So how do we then? So if we don't raise property taxes,
if we don't raise property taxes, then we
fully
have
fund the schools?
we have to tax our businesses differently than we do. And when I say differently, I mean more.
Yeah.
Like you said, like I did, grew up with tradespeople parents, and HVAC is generally a much more lucrative field than cabinet making. Just for anybody
certainly.
Considering the trades, go and could do that. Don't become a cabinet
plumbing,
maker. My dad would
HVAC.
100% like be angry with me if I didn't say that. Do not go into cabinet. Cabinet making is a beautiful trade, but it's a tough business. So as are so many small businesses, and we don't want to make it harder for them, but we have a lot of big box stores. We have a new Amazon distribution warehouse, and Amazon is one of the many companies that is as quickly as possible replacing workers with robots.
Yeah.
So that's why I find the business personal property tax to be an appealing vehicle. And that is, that's a tax that taxes businesses for their assets, not just for the space, which is the real property tax.
Yeah.
And so if we're talking about a business personal property tax and an Amazon distribution center, I think that's probably going to include some heavy equipment that is high value. I'm always careful to acknowledge that I work for the largest member organization for the biotech industry globally, I think. But it's a national organization. It has a lobbying arm. I'm not in the lobbying arm. I'm not a lobbyist. And I think it's important to anticipate how I would recuse myself and avoid conflict of interest. So with that disclaimer, the biotech industry is one that people like to see. It brings in jobs, not only jobs that are for scientists and business people who work in life sciences. It's also, here we have a lot of manufacturing jobs in the biotech industry, and these are high-paying jobs. We can train people to do them. There's a big investment in manufacturing in the country right now, which is kind of in part due to it's like the bad clock that hits the right time a couple of times a day. So there is real investment happening, and it's happening from pharmaceutical companies that are
a large part of that is COVID just taught us about supply chains, that we cannot have this globalization of our economy.
Absolutely.
There
is a national security benefit to being able to not only design drug therapies in-house, but to also make them. And that my company would be like, if they saw me talking this much about going this far into talking points.
Well, it's not like anybody's listening, but
yeah.
All right, so back to you a little bit then. So tell me about.
But wait, no, I do want to finish this. Yeah. I do want to finish my thought, which was for anybody who's concerned that we might drive away the biotech sector specifically, Maryland actually is very favorable. We have a limit on what kind of equipment can be taxed under business personal property tax. So even a big company like AstraZeneca, we would be able to tax them with business personal property tax. We would be able to tax them for things like their chairs and their computers. But when it came to if it comes to any kind of specialized equipment, their refrigeration systems, all of that, their clean rooms, that gets left alone. And that is state policy. So
Okay. All right. Back to you.
Cool.
So tell me something. This is one of my favorite questions. Tell me something where you made a mistake and how you remedied it, how you worked through that in your life. It doesn't have to be your biggest one. I'm not looking for anything that's, super personal, but just how did you work through recognizing, because one of the most important qualities to me in any elected official is I was wrong, and here's how I got information about that and moved into the future. So give me an example. It's okay if you don't. I've had people say to me, I've never been wrong. So
no, I mean, I've definitely made mistakes. I think, there was a time when I felt so betrayed by local government because of the data center that I was pretty quick and hot-headed and how I would talk about folks behind it. And then when I decided to run for office, I think it's not that I became a politician. It's that I found a channel for my outrage, and I didn't need to feel outrage anymore.
Okay.
If that makes any sense. I think anger can be a productive feeling. And by jumping into the arena where I thought change needed to be made, I was able to productively channel my anger. And prior to that, I think it wasn't as productive. And when you start, you say something about someone, you say something, I'm not talking about anything that's super personal, but maybe something I wouldn't want to say directly to someone's face. When you actually see them in a social space, because now you're a politician, then it's oh, I shouldn't do that anymore. I should, and I don't really have the impulse to, but yeah, that's kind of, okay. I'm being intentionally a bit vague.
Your answer,
but yeah.
Okay, so flip side of that, tell me something in your life that you're proud of. Or something you did, or something,
oh gosh, I wonder how he would feel about this. I'm really proud of, I have a good career. I've worked really hard for my career. Yeah. I own a house. I've worked really hard to buy my house. I feel like I've worked hard for what I have, and I had advantages too. I have great parents, and they were really supportive, and they made a lot of sacrifices for me to go to the best public school. I mean, they bought a radium house to get me into a really good school district. So all of that aside, I've worked hard for what I have in life, but I'm very proud of having found an incredible partner, which I feel like people might condemn. People might be like, "Oh, that's so anti-feminist," but it's, I
think that there is simply nothing. I've said this before that, my time overseas, the Iraq War taught me that all that really matters in life is moments shared with people that care about you, that you care about them. That's everything else is fluff. We need to feed ourselves. We need to protect our environment. We need to make sure we have jobs. I'm so blessed that I try to spend my time to create opportunity for other people. These are all important things to do. But the most important is having people in your life that I'm sure it's from some movie that I can't remember, but it's that this idea of we want people to bear witness to us, that we matter and we exist. And I think that partnership is an incredible way of doing that. So I say, forget anybody who says that that's not a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it's funny that it's like my grandmother died maybe like, oh gosh, like 26 years ago. I think she died in 2000. And her best friend died earlier this year.
Wow.
She was 100.
Wow.
And I saw her, and I wanted her to meet my husband, who I'm very proud of. So we went and visited with her, and it was at the end of her life. And I knew it was going to be the last time I saw her. But she really loved my grandmother. And my grandmother was a difficult woman. They're not, even her own children mostly remember her for being a difficult woman. And at times, you know, a woman who was unkind, I think most of all to herself. But her friend loved her, and her best friend was a wonderful person who everybody described as such. And I think it's something to be 26 years after dying to be still loved by someone. So,
yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that part of you. And thank you for all this time. So how do people get a hold of you?
Louisa at louisa4frederick.com. I copied Illyria Stanley on that. And before I realized that she was doing the number 4 because she's in district. She's 4,
yes,
state 4.
indeed.
So I was, but yeah, I just didn't want to have people typing out too many letters. My name's long enough.
So it's Louisa
at Louisa4Frederick.
Yeah, Louisa1Frederick.com would not have District 1. That wouldn't have made nearly as much sense.
No.
Indeed. Okay, Louisa4, the number 4, Frederick.com.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me in.